Foundations of Faith Olivia Henderson traced her finger along the rim of her coffee mug, watching steam rise in lazy spirals as she sat in the corner booth of Persephone's cafe. This had been their spot, hers and Julian's, for nearly a decade. The place where they'd first met when she'd spilled iced coffee on his economics textbook. The place where, 2 years later, he'd squeezed her hand across this very table and whispered that she was his future. Now, at 34, Olivia sat alone, wondering how 8 years of building a life with someone could dissolve so completely. "You're doing that thing again," said Nora, sliding into the booth opposite her. Olivia's best friend since college placed a plate of blueberry scones between them. "The thing where you look like you're solving all the world's problems in your head." "Just one problem," Olivia replied with a faint smile. "The Julian Westbrook problem." Nora sighed, breaking a scone in half. "He doesn't deserve this much real estate in your thoughts, Liv. Not after what he did." Olivia nodded, though the agreement felt hollow. Julian hadn't always been the villain in their story. For most of their relationship, he'd been her partner in the truest sense. When they'd met, Julian had been a struggling business major with mountains of student debt and a cramped studio apartment. Olivia, already established in her career as a physical therapist, had believed in him fiercely. She'd proofread his applications for business school, quizzed him on financial models until 2 in the morning, and celebrated every small victory. When he landed an entry-level position at Meridian Consulting, she'd surprised him with a leather portfolio that cost her nearly a week's salary. "We're investing in our future," she'd told him, brushing off his protests about the expense. "Someday, when you're running the place, we'll look back at this moment and laugh about how nervous you were." The memory stung now. Olivia had been right about his success, just wrong about the "our" part. For 6 years, they'd built a life together brick by careful brick. They'd moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment, adopted a rescue dog named Rusty, and started a shared savings account labeled Someday House. On weekends, they would drive to open houses in neighborhoods they couldn't yet afford, holding hands as they wandered through kitchens and backyards, whispering about where their furniture would go, which room would become a nursery. "I always thought we'd get married here," Olivia murmured, gazing around the cafe. "Remember how Julian used to joke that we should hire the barista who witnessed our meet-cute to officiate?" Nora reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I remember. But I also remember how he changed, Liv. The last year wasn't good. The changes had been subtle at first. Julian's promotion to senior consultant had meant longer hours and business trips. Olivia had supported him completely, sending care packages to his hotel rooms and keeping dinner warm no matter how late he returned. But something shifted when he became the youngest partner in Meridian's history. Suddenly, their cozy apartment wasn't representative of his position. Rusty's fur on the furniture became an annoyance rather than an endearing reality of pet ownership. The local restaurants they'd always loved were replaced by exclusive establishments where Julian could network with clients. "He became someone else," Olivia said quietly. "And I kept waiting for the Julian I knew to come back." The final months had been a slow-motion car crash. Julian started attending social events without her, claiming they were just business. His phone became permanently attached to his hand, always angled away from her view. When she asked about their future, the house, the wedding they'd planned in theory but never in practice, the children they'd named hypothetically, his answers grew vague and non-committal. "You know what hurts the most?" Olivia said, looking up at her friend with eyes that refused to shed any more tears. "I still love the person he was. I keep wondering if I could have done something differently to keep him from changing." "That's not how it works, sweetie," Nora replied gently. "People make their choices. Julian chose status over substance. That's not on you." The bell above the cafe door jingled, and Olivia's gaze automatically shifted toward the sound, a habit she couldn't seem to break. For a split second, Her heart stuttered as a tall man with dark hair entered, but it wasn't Julian. It never was these days. "You'll get through this," Nora promised, though they both knew the road ahead was long. "One day at a time." Olivia nodded, taking a deep breath as she looked around the cafe where her story with Julian had begun. She couldn't have known then that it would end with him walking away, or that 3 months after their breakup, she would see photos online of Julian with Vanessa Prescott, the 23-year-old social media darling whose father sat on Meridian's board of directors. What she did know was that eventually somehow she would have to find a way forward without him. The fractured Julian's BMW purred to a stop in front of the high-rise apartment building that housed Meridian Consulting's newest partner. Olivia watched from the passenger seat as he adjusted his Rolex, a recent self-gift to celebrate his promotion, and ran a hand through his expertly trimmed hair. "You sure you don't want to come up?" he asked, though his tone lacked conviction. "Preston's parties are always impressive." "In my clinic scrubs?" Olivia gestured to her work clothes. She'd come straight from a 12-hour shift to meet him. "I'd stick out like a sore thumb among all those designer dresses." Something flashed across Julian's face. Was it relief? "We could swing by home so you could change. It's almost 10, and I have an early patient tomorrow." She leaned over to kiss him, but he turned slightly so her lips grazed his cheek instead. "Have fun. Don't wake me if you're late." As Julian strode toward the building's gleaming entrance, Olivia realized she'd been holding her breath. These days, their conversations felt like navigating a minefield. Careful, measured, nothing like the easy rhythm they'd once shared. She took an Uber home, greeted by Rusty's enthusiastic welcome. After changing into pajamas, she scrolled through old photos on her phone, Julian and her hiking in Yosemite, building a blanket fort during a power outage, him asleep on the couch with Rusty sprawled across his chest. "Where did we lose each other?" she whispered to the empty room. The next morning, she woke to find Julian's side of the bed untouched. A text explained he'd crashed at Preston's after the party ran late. It was the 3rd time that month. Days bled into weeks of increasingly parallel lives. Julian worked later, traveled more, and when physically present, seemed mentally elsewhere. His wardrobe transformed from comfortable button-downs to tailored suits that cost more than their monthly rent. New colleagues replaced old friends in his stories. One evening, as they ate takeout at their kitchen counter, Julian checking emails between bites, Olivia finally broke. "Do you even want this anymore?" she asked, her voice steady despite the earthquake in her chest. Julian looked up, genuine surprise crossing his features. "Want what?" She gestured between them. "Us. This life we planned. The house, marriage, family, any of it." "Of course I do," he replied automatically, but his eyes slid back to his phone. "Just not right now. Things are moving fast at work, and I need to capitalize on the momentum." "That's what you said last year," Olivia pointed out, "and the year before. When does not right now become never?" Julian set down his phone with deliberate care. "That's not fair. I'm building something for our future." "But we're missing our present," she countered. "When was the last time we spent a weekend together? Had a conversation that didn't revolve around your job? Made love without you checking notifications immediately after?" The silence that followed was deafening. "I think we should talk about where this is going," Julian finally said, his tone shifting to the one he used in business negotiations. "We're in different places right now." "Different places?" Olivia repeated. "We live in the same apartment, sleep in the same bed, when you come home anyway. Professionally, I mean, I'm establishing connections with people who can help advance my career. The social aspect is important. And I'm, what? A hindrance?" Julian sighed. "I didn't say that, but you have to admit, we've grown in different directions." The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. They hadn't grown in different directions. Julian had walked away while she remained rooted in the plans they'd made together. 3 days later, coming home early from work with soup for Julian's supposed cold, Olivia found him packing a suitcase. "What are you doing?" she asked, though the answer was painfully obvious. "I think we need some space," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I've been talking with Preston, and he has a guest suite I can use until I find my own place." "Space," she repeated numbly. "Is this about Vanessa Prescott?" Julian's head snapped up. "What? No! How do you even know about Vanessa?" "Instagram. You've been tagged in her posts 3 times this month. She's a colleague's daughter. It's not what you think." But his too quick denial told Olivia everything. She set the soup container down on his meticulously folded shirts. 8 years, Julian. We deserve more than I need space." He zipped the suitcase with finality. "I care about you, Olivia. I always will. But I think we both know we've outgrown what we had." "No," she said quietly. "You've outgrown who you were, and I don't recognize who you've become." When he left that evening, Rusty whined at the door for hours. Olivia sat on the floor beside the dog, stroking his fur as they both mourned the departure of someone who had already been gone for months. The official breakup aftermath was clinical. Julian arranged for movers to collect his remaining belongings while Olivia was at work. His portion of the rent appeared in her account with a sterile memo, "Housing contribution, April." Their shared savings account was divided evenly, the someday house dream liquidated into practical numbers on a bank statement. Friends chose sides. Some, like Nora, stood firmly with Olivia. Others disappeared into Julian's new social orbit. Mutual acquaintances avoided mentioning him around her, creating conversational black holes where his name should have been. Exactly 12 weeks after Julian moved out, Olivia's phone exploded with messages. Friends sending screenshots, links to social media posts, all showing the same thing. Julian and Vanessa Prescott on a yacht in the Mediterranean, her hand adorned with a massive diamond ring, his arm around her waist as they smiled for the camera. The caption read, "When you know, you know. Just said yes. Forever starts." Nora arrived at Olivia's apartment 20 minutes later with ice cream and whiskey. "The internet is calling him every name in the book," she reported, pouring generous shots. "Everyone can see what happened." "Everyone, except me," Olivia said, staring at the photo. Julian looked happier than he had in their final year together. "I kept thinking he'd come back." That night, after Nora left, Olivia deleted all social media apps from her phone. She boxed up the few photos of Julian she'd kept displayed, tucking them into the back of her closet. Then she sat down and wrote a letter she would never send, pouring out 8 years of love, confusion, and finally, acceptance. When she finished, she folded the pages and burned them in the sink, watching the ashes swirl down the drain. A ritual, ending to a chapter of her life that had already closed without her permission. The invitation. The spring after Julian left bloomed with painful irony. Cherry blossoms dusted the sidewalks, couples emerged from winter hibernation hand in hand, and Olivia found herself navigating a world that seemed determined to remind her of everything she had lost. "You need to get out more," Nora insisted one Saturday morning as they jogged around the lake. "It's been 7 months." "I get out," Olivia protested, gesturing to the park around them. "I'm literally outside right now. You know what I mean? When was the last time you went on a date?" Olivia increased her pace slightly. "I'm not ready." "You'll never feel ready," Nora said, easily matching her stride. "That's the dirty secret about moving on. You just start doing it before you feel like it, and eventually, your heart catches up." Perhaps Nora was right. Olivia had rebuilt other aspects of her life with methodical determination. She'd taken on additional clients at the physical therapy practice, using the extra income to redecorate the apartment that now felt too large for just her and Rusty. She'd joined a weekend hiking group, started taking cooking classes, and even traveled solo to Vancouver for a long weekend, something she'd always wanted to do, but Julian had continually postponed. Yet the prospect of romantic connection remained a step too far. The thought of explaining herself to someone new, of unpacking, the baggage of her relationship with Julian, it exhausted her before she'd even begun. Baby steps, Nora conceded as they finished their run. But promise me you'll say yes to Dominic's dinner party next weekend? It's just friends, no pressure. Olivia hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but you have to promise not to try setting me up with anyone. Scout's honor? Nora replied, raising 3 fingers in a solemn salute that didn't quite mask her mischievous smile. When Olivia returned home, sweaty and pleasantly tired, she almost missed the cream-colored envelope amid the usual bills and flyers. It bore no return address, just her name in elegant calligraphy that made her heart stutter with recognition. Inside was a heavy cardstock invitation, embossed with silver foil. Mr. and Mrs. Richard Prescott request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter, Vanessa Elizabeth Prescott, to Julian Andrew Westbrook. Saturday, the 28th of May at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The grand terrace at Bellevue Estate, Olivia sat heavily on her entryway bench, the invitation, trembling in her hands. May 28th, less than 3 weeks away. A wave of nausea rolled through her as she imagined Julian and Vanessa exchanging vows at what was undoubtedly an extravagant venue, surrounded by the elite social circle he'd chosen over the life they'd planned together. Beneath the invitation was a handwritten note on monogrammed stationery. She braced herself, expecting some performative kindness from Vanessa, or worse, from Julian himself, a patronizing gesture of closure. Instead, she found unfamiliar handwriting. Olivia, you don't know me, but I feel I know you through the stories my son has shared over the years. I'm Gerald Westbrook, Julian's father. I understand this invitation comes as a surprise, perhaps even an unwelcome one. Julian doesn't know I've added you to the guest list. Call it an old man's prerogative or perhaps a father's lingering hope for his son's character. You supported Julian through years when the Prescotts of the world wouldn't have given him a second glance. That kind of loyalty deserves recognition, even if my son has temporarily forgotten its value. No pressure to attend. But if you do, I promise you won't be seated at the children's table or relegated to the back of the room. You'll be at table 1, as my personal guest. With respect and admiration, Gerald Westbrook, Olivia read the note 3 times, emotions cycling between shock, curiosity, and a strange sense of validation. She'd met Julian's parents only a handful of times over their 8 years together. They lived in Seattle, visiting rarely, though Julian spoke to his father weekly. Gerald had always been cordial but reserved, a successful architect with a wry sense of humor and penetrating gaze that seemed to evaluate everything it landed on. She'd never expected this kind of gesture from him. Her first instinct was to call Nora, but something stopped her. This felt private, a crossroads she needed to contemplate alone. She tucked the invitation into her nightstand drawer and tried to push it from her mind, but over the next few days, Gerald's note haunted her. During patient sessions, on her evening walks with Rusty, in the quiet moments before sleep, his words echoed, a father's lingering hope for his son's character. What was Gerald hoping to accomplish? Was this some elaborate test for Julian, or for her? And why did part of her, a part she wasn't proud of, feel a surge of satisfaction at the thought of walking into that wedding head held high, showing Julian exactly what he'd discarded? You can't seriously be considering this, Nora said when Olivia finally confessed about the invitation. They were having dinner at Nora's apartment, the invitation spread between them on the coffee table. It's masochistic. Maybe, Olivia admitted, but there's something about Gerald's note that feels, I don't know, unfinished? Like there's more to this story. Or maybe he's just a manipulative old man playing games with his son's wedding. Nora refilled their wine glasses. And you'd be walking into a psychological minefield. What if Julian confronts you? What if his child bride makes a scene? She's 23, not 12, Olivia corrected, though the 9-year age gap between Vanessa and Julian still stung. And Gerald specifically said Julian doesn't know I was invited. Which makes it even weirder, Nora exclaimed. Look, I get the appeal of showing up looking fabulous and unbothered. It's the fantasy we all have after a breakup. But reality rarely matches the revenge scenario we play out in our heads. Olivia traced the embossed lettering of the invitation. It's not about revenge. I think I need closure. Real closure, not just burning letters in my sink at midnight. Nora's expression softened. Then write him a letter he actually receives, or schedule a coffee meeting. There are healthier ways to get closure than attending his wedding to someone else. You're probably right, Olivia conceded. But that night, alone in her apartment, she found herself opening her laptop and searching for Bellevue Estate. The venue was as grand as she'd imagined. A historic mansion set on manicured grounds overlooking the city. In another life, it might have been where she and Julian celebrated their own union. She thought about Gerald Westbrook's note again, about the subtle disapproval it conveyed regarding his son's choices, about the seat at table 1, presumably with the family and closest friends, about showing up not as the bitter ex, but as someone invited and welcomed by the father of the groom. Before she could second-guess herself, Olivia opened her closet and assessed its contents. Nothing seemed appropriate for such an occasion. If she was going to do this, and she was increasingly certain she would, she'd need something new. Something that made a statement without trying too hard. The next morning, she called the number on the RSVP card. This is the office of Elaine Prescott, wedding coordinator for the Prescott-Westbrook celebration, answered a crisp, professional voice. Hello? Olivia replied, her heart hammering. My name is Olivia Henderson. I'd like to RSVP for the wedding on May 28th. A brief pause. Henderson? Yes. Gerald Westbrook's guest. Will you be bringing a +1, Ms. Henderson? The question caught her off guard. A date would provide emotional support but also complicate what was already a delicate situation. No, she decided. Just myself. Very well. You're confirmed for table 1, as requested by Mr. Westbrook. The ceremony begins at 4, with cocktails at 5 and dinner at 6:30. Thank you, Olivia said, a surreal feeling washing over her as the reality of her decision sank in. Miss Henderson? The coordinator added before hanging up. Yes, Mr. Westbrook Sr. asked to be notified if you accepted. He'll be pleased to hear you're coming. As Olivia ended the call, a strange calm settled over her. Whatever Gerald Westbrook's motives, whatever scene might unfold at that wedding, she had committed herself to this final chapter of her story with Julian. All that remained was to prepare herself, mentally and sartorially, for whatever awaited her at Bellevue Estate. The day of Julian's wedding dawned with picture-perfect weather, the kind that wedding planners dream about and photographers charge extra to capture. Olivia stood at her bedroom window, watching sunlight spill across the city skyline, wondering if it was a good omen or the universe's idea of a cruel joke. This is insane, she muttered to Rusty, who wagged his tail supportively from his bed in the corner. Completely insane. Yet 4 hours later, she found herself in the back of a rideshare, dressed in a midnight blue gown that had cost more than she'd spent on clothing in the past year. The dress had been an impulse purchase, fitted through the bodice with a subtle flare below the knee, elegant without trying too hard. Her hair was swept into a low chignon, and she wore the pearl earrings her grandmother had left her own small talisman of strength. As the car approached Bellevue Estate, Olivia's composure began to crack. The grounds were even more impressive in person. Meticulously landscaped gardens surrounded the historic mansion, where white chairs had been arranged in perfect rows facing an elaborate floral arch. Guests in formal attire strolled toward the ceremony site, their laughter and conversation floating on the spring breeze. "I can still leave," she reminded herself, hands clenched tightly around her clutch. "No one's seen me yet." But as she wavered, a distinguished man with silver hair and Julian's unmistakable profile approached her car. "Ms. Henderson?" Gerald Westbrook opened her door before the driver could, extending a hand to help her out. "I'd recognize you anywhere. You look exactly as Julian described you, though he failed to mention how elegant you are." Olivia accepted his hand, suddenly grateful for the support as she stepped onto the gravel drive in her heels. "Mr. Westbrook, I'm still not entirely sure why I'm here." His smile was cryptic. "Sometimes we need to witness endings to truly believe them." He offered his arm. "May I escort you to your seat? The ceremony is about to begin." With Gerald's arm beneath her fingers, Olivia felt a curious shift in the dynamic she'd imagined. She wasn't sneaking in as the scorned ex-girlfriend. She was arriving as the honored guest of the father of the groom. Heads turned as they walked the path toward the ceremony site, whispers following in their wake. "Isn't that Julian's ex? What is she doing with Gerald? Did you see how he's escorting her himself?" Gerald led her to the front row on the groom's side, directly beside an empty seat presumably reserved for himself. On her other side sat a woman she recognized as Julian's mother, Catherine, who regarded her with wide eyes. "Olivia?" "I didn't know you'd be—" "Catherine," Gerald interrupted smoothly. "I invited Olivia personally. She'll be sitting with us." Before Catherine could respond, music swelled from the string quartet positioned beneath a nearby oak tree. The processional had begun. Olivia sat rigidly, painfully aware of the curious glances from guests behind them. On the far side of Catherine, Julian's younger sister Eliza leaned forward to offer Olivia a small, confused wave. And then Julian appeared, walking down the aisle with the officiant. He looked handsome in his tailored tuxedo, hair perfectly coiffed, the picture of successful confidence. His expression was serene until his gaze locked with Olivia's. The shock that transformed his features was almost comical, eyes widening, mouth parting, steps faltering slightly before he recovered. Gerald's hand patted Olivia's arm gently. "Breathe," he murmured. "You're doing fine." As Julian took his place at the altar, his eyes kept darting to the front row, confusion and alarm evident. A moment later, the bridal procession began. Vanessa, resplendent in a designer gown that likely cost more than Olivia's annual salary, floated down the aisle on her father's arm. She was undeniably beautiful, with the polished perfection of someone who had been groomed for society pages since birth. Olivia had prepared herself for jealousy, for the searing pain of watching Julian pledge himself to another woman. What she hadn't expected was the strange detachment that settled over her as the ceremony progressed. The vows, the rings, the kiss. They seemed to be happening to characters in a film rather than to the man she'd once planned to spend her life with. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared, and applause erupted around them. As the newlyweds processed back down the aisle, Julian's gaze again found Olivia's. This time there was something beyond shock in his expression, something that looked almost like guilt. "Phase 1 complete," Gerald said enigmatically as they rose to join the crowd moving toward the cocktail reception on the terrace. "Are you all right?" Olivia realized with surprise that she was. "Yes," she answered honestly. "Better than I expected." The cocktail hour passed in a blur of introductions and surreptitious glances. Gerald kept her firmly at his side, introducing her to business associates and family friends with pointed mentions of her career achievements and the years she'd spent supporting Julian when he was just starting out. Catherine, after her initial shock, seemed to take her cue from her husband, treating Olivia with warm familiarity. Julian kept his distance, circulating among guests with Vanessa on his arm, though Olivia caught him watching her several times. Once, when their eyes met across the terrace, she raised her champagne glass in a small toast. His expression was unreadable as he turned away. "He's wondering what game we're playing," Gerald observed, following her gaze. "Good. A little uncertainty builds character." "Is that what this is about?" Olivia asked. "Building Julian's character?" Gerald's eyes crinkled. "Perhaps mine as well. Come, they're seating for dinner." Table 1, as promised, was the family table. Olivia found herself seated between Gerald and Eliza, directly across from Julian's maternal grandmother, who regarded her with shrewd interest. Julian and Vanessa sat at the center, with Vanessa's parents flanking them. The seating arrangement made it impossible for Julian to avoid looking at Olivia throughout the meal. After the main course was cleared, the moment Olivia had been dreading arrived. The best man rose to give his toast, followed by Vanessa's maid of honor. Then the MC announced, "And now a few words from the father of the groom." Gerald stood, champagne glass in hand, commanding the room with effortless authority. His gaze swept across the assembled guests before settling on the newlyweds. "When Julian was a boy," he began, his voice resonant in the hushed ballroom, "I taught him that a man's character is revealed not by what he accomplishes, but by how he treats those who helped him accomplish it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Beside Olivia, Catherine shifted uncomfortably. "My son has accomplished much in his 35 years, Gerald continued. "He's risen through the ranks at Meridian with remarkable speed. He's secured himself a place in circles his mother and I never aspired to. And today, he's married a beautiful young woman from one of the city's most prominent families." He paused, taking a deliberate sip of champagne. Julian's expression had hardened, his jaw tight as he seemed to anticipate where his father's speech was heading. "As a father, I should be nothing but proud, and yet I find myself reflecting on what we leave behind in our pursuit of what we think we want." Gerald's gaze shifted to Olivia, and suddenly every eye in the room followed. "Some people come into our lives as stepping stones, used and forgotten as we climb. Others are foundations, solid, dependable, essential to everything we build." Silence in the ballroom was absolute. Vanessa's hand had frozen around her water glass, her perfect smile growing brittle. "I had the privilege of watching my son build a life with someone who embodied loyalty, kindness, and unwavering support." Gerald's voice softened. "Someone who believed in him when his potential was just that. Potential. Someone who loved the man, not the position or the paycheck." Julian's face had drained of color. Across the table, Vanessa's mother pressed her lips into a thin line. "So I'd like to propose a toast," Gerald said, raising his glass higher. "To foundations, to the people who lift us up without asking for the spotlight, to those who love us for who we are, not who we might become or what we might provide." He turned fully to Olivia now, inclining his glass toward her. "To Olivia Henderson, whose grace in being here today speaks volumes about her character. May we all aspire to love as genuinely and to recognize such love when we're fortunate enough to receive it." The room erupted into confused murmuring. Some guests raised their glasses uncertainly, others exchanged bewildered glances. Julian stared at his father with undisguised horror, while Vanessa's expression had turned glacial. Gerald sat down calmly, as if he'd delivered the most conventional of wedding toasts. Under the table, he squeezed Olivia's hand once, briefly. "And now," the MC interjected hastily, clearly trying to move past the uncomfortable moment, "please welcome the newlyweds to the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife." As Julian woodenly led Vanessa to the center of the ballroom, Olivia leaned toward Gerald. "That wasn't what I expected," she whispered. "What did you expect?" he asked, his expression innocent. "I don't know, but not that." Too much? For the first time, Gerald looked slightly uncertain. "Maybe a little," Olivia admitted. Then, surprising herself, she added, "But thank you." Across the room, a young woman Olivia recognized as one of Vanessa's bridesmaids was recording the awkward first dance on her phone. Several other guests had devices raised as well, capturing the aftermath of Gerald's unprecedented toast. Eliza leaned toward Olivia. "Dad's speech is definitely going viral," she whispered. "Tori, that bridesmaid with the phone, has like 1 million followers. She live streams everything." Olivia felt a sudden pang of sympathy for Julian and Vanessa. Whatever his sins against her, this was still their wedding day. "Maybe I should go," she murmured to Gerald. "I've seen enough." Gerald nodded, understanding. In his eyes. "I'll walk you out." As they rose from the table, Julian's gaze snapped to them. He whispered something to Vanessa and broke away from their dance, intercepting Olivia and his father at the edge of the ballroom. "What the hell was that?" he hissed, his composure finally cracking. "What are you doing here, Olivia? And Dad, what were you thinking with that speech?" Gerald regarded his son steadily. "I was thinking that some lessons are worth learning, even on your wedding day. Especially on your wedding day." Julian's face flushed. "You've embarrassed me in front of everyone, in front of the Prescotts." "No, son," Gerald replied quietly. "You did that yourself when you forgot who helped you become the man they wanted their daughter to marry." Julian turned to Olivia, his expression a complex mixture of anger, shame, and something harder to define. "I'm sorry you were dragged into this." "I wasn't dragged," Olivia said, finding strength in the realization that she felt more pity than pain. "I came because I needed to see this chapter close, and now I have." She offered him a small, genuine smile. "Be happy, Julian. I mean, that." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, Gerald at her side. Behind them, the music continued, guests returned to dancing, and Julian stood alone at the edge of his wedding reception, watching as the woman he'd once built a life with walked out of his story for the last time. In the grand entrance hall, away from prying eyes, Gerald paused. "I hope you don't regret coming." "I don't," Olivia said, surprised to find it was true. "Though I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish." Gerald's smile was tinged with sadness. "Perhaps I wanted my son to see what he'd lost, clearly and publicly. Perhaps I wanted to offer you the recognition you deserved. Or perhaps I'm just an old man who believes that actions should have consequences, even for those we love. Maybe especially for those we love." He reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. "Your car is waiting outside. This should cover any inconvenience today may have caused you." Olivia shook her head, pushing the envelope back into his hand. "I didn't come for money." "No," Gerald acknowledged, tucking it away. "That's exactly why you deserved it." 3 months after Julian's wedding, Olivia sat in her favorite corner of Persephone's cafe, laptop open as she reviewed patient files. The bell above the door jingled and she glanced up automatically, a habit she was finally breaking. "There she is," Nora announced, sliding into the booth opposite her. "The accidental internet sensation," Olivia groaned. "Please tell me it's dying down." The video of Gerald's wedding toast had indeed gone viral, amassing millions of views across platforms. What had begun as society gossip transformed into a broader conversation about loyalty, relationships, and the often invisible emotional labor women performed. Olivia had received hundreds of messages from strangers sharing similar stories, along with interview requests from morning shows and podcasts, all of which she'd declined. "Actually," Nora said, pulling out her phone, "you've got a new admirer. Remember that physical therapy journal you've been trying to get published in? Check your email." Olivia opened her inbox to find a message from the editor-in-chief of Modern Rehabilitation, requesting an article about her innovative approach to post-surgical recovery. The note mentioned they'd been impressed by her professional reputation when her name surfaced through recent media attention. See? Sometimes viral moments have silver linings, Nora said. Olivia smiled, remembering the other unexpected outcomes of Gerald's speech. 3 of her patients had referred friends to her practice. A wellness center had invited her to lead a workshop series. And most surprising, Catherine Westbrook had reached out, suggesting lunch independent of family complications. Any word from Julian? Nora asked cautiously. Nothing direct, Olivia replied. She'd heard through mutual connections that Julian and Vanessa had cut their honeymoon short after photos of Gerald's toast circulated online. Meridian's board had reportedly expressed concerns about the public relations implications. Eliza mentioned he's transferred to their London office. Running. Away, Nora observed. Or starting fresh, Olivia countered. Maybe we all needed a clean break? Outside the cafe window, early autumn sunlight gilded the street. Across the way, a real estate sign caught Olivia's eye, a charming brownstone with a small garden. I've been thinking, she said slowly. Maybe it's time to look for that someday house after all, just for me and Rusty. And someday for someone who actually deserves you, Nora added. Olivia smiled, surprised to find the idea didn't sting anymore. The viral moment had been uncomfortable, but it had also drawn a definitive line under her past. Whatever came next, career advancements, a new home, perhaps eventually a new relationship, would be entirely her own. Her phone chimed with a text from the hiking group, confirming weekend plans. Life was moving forward in ways she couldn't have imagined that day she'd received Gerald's invitation. To new beginnings, she said, raising her coffee cup. Nora clinked her mug against Olivia's, and to foundations strong enough to build something better. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, indifferent to individual dramas. Olivia turned back to her laptop, mentally drafting the outline for her journal article. The wedding video would eventually fade from public memory, but the life she was rebuilding would endure, brick by careful brick, stronger for having been tested, entirely her own.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.